Video games are a unique medium that allows us to learn tons of backstory about various characters we get invested in during the course of our game. And sometimes they die. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 video game characters who did not deserve to die. Of course, we have to put out a quick disclaimer, this is just going to be a spoiler-ridden video. We're talking about characters dying, so literally just saying the names like number 10 blank, that's gonna be a spoiler. And there's no way for me to warn specifics for you. Any warning basically acts as a spoiler when you're talking about characters dying. Proceed with caution. Starting off at number 10 is Soap McTavish from Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. Soap's first appearance was in the first Modern Warfare. He's part of the Bravo team. He was involved in stopping several nuclear plots. He was involved in stopping Lieutenant General Shepard, his double-crossing betrayer of a commanding officer. And during the course of Modern Warfare 3, this is a person who sacrifices himself. It's a selfless man. Of course he didn't deserve to die. The last mission of the game is dedicated to him. This is for Soap, they say. Obviously, the best they can do, but it's impossible to repay someone for such a lifetime of selfless service that ended in sacrifice. Number 9, buckle up, it only gets worse. Vesemir. Oh, Vesemir. Let's just be clear, Vesemir is a sterling example of a perfect mentor, father figure, sympathetic ear with sage-like wisdom. He's a kind man who's wise and at times quite funny. Vesemir first shows up in The Witcher as an NPC in Kaer Morhen, and in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt he is a hunting buddy, at least for the first stretch of the game. He does, however, pretty much just disappear for a long time, in some ways signifying, hey, you're on your own now, you gotta play this game for yourself. He does come back, however, later in the game. This lovely old Witcher, someone that you hold dear, someone that Ciri, the person in danger, holds dear, dies fending off the Wild Hunt, which of course is a noble way to go, given they're the main villains of the entire game. It's them that's the subtitle of the game. However, it is not even a bittersweet moment, it is hard. It's actually what forces Ciri to act in a manner that actually defeats the Wild Hunt. So in some ways, you could call it necessary, but that doesn't mean he deserved it. Let's all pour one out for Vesemir, eh? At number 8 is Simon Ghost Riley, a man who grew up in a tumultuous situation, with a father who of all things brought dangerous snakes back to the house to taunt his son with, threatening to kill him at one point. There's a number of events that you actually learn about over the course of this guy's portrayal in games that are really brutal and sad. And he joined up with the military after the September 11 attacks on New York. Remember how we were talking about Soap? How he engaged in efforts to stop the betraying commanding officer General Shepard? Yeah, that guy killed Ghost during a mission to try to stop Makarov. And during the course of the mission, he's betrayed by Shepard, shot at point blank, along with Roach, thrown in a ditch and burnt. No one deserves that, especially not somebody who is trying to ultimately save lives. Ultimately, that could be said about just about any death in the Call of Duty franchise. The whole point is about saving lives. At number 7 is Dom in Gears of War 3. Now, the most obvious thing to state here is that between Marcus and Dom, there's a long-standing friendship. Both Marcus and Dom also have a profound sense of obligation towards attempting to right the wrongs of the world. Dom spends years searching for his wife, who he finds lobotomized and in a horrible state where she's probably brain dead. And if she's not brain dead, it's probably worse. No one should live like that. And he had to put her out of her misery, and it destroyed him. And then after that, he fends off this massive attack against everyone, realizing that it's just not possible for them to get away unscathed. He rammed a truck into a tanker that exploded, and he was able to save his friends with that sacrifice. Dom lived a grief-filled life. His hopes were more or less destroyed, and he still sacrificed himself for everyone else. If we're talking about deserving, this is someone who deserved the exact opposite of what he got in every sense. At number 6, it's Cole Phelps from LA Noire. Cole solved murders. He found who was killing and prevented who knows how many deaths. He He was promoted to detective and then promoted to homicide. It needs to be said how valuable the type of work someone like Cole Phelps does is, because the type of people that they figure out are killers. Say what you want about cops. There's plenty of corrupt cops out there, and I'm sure there's corrupt detectives as well. But if a detective is doing their job, a tremendous amount of life could potentially be saved. And Cole Phelps was easily one of the best. I mean, you play as him, you better be damn good at it. That's the point of the game, right? Cole ends up helping Elsa and Kelso out of a tunnel that's flooding, and he was the last to get out, and, well, a huge wave came and swept him away. He drowned. Again, self-sacrifice is more or less a thing that gets you the doesn't deserve to die card, but to die drowning, which is not fast, it's not painless, and it's probably utterly terrifying. This was a good person. And at number 5, it's Lee Everett Oly. For anyone who has spent a significant amount of time in The Walking Dead, Lee Everett is a tough one. He's the protagonist of season 1, and he's one of the most compassionate, benevolent type of people there could be. He spends pretty much the entire first season protecting Clementine, which he has no obligation to do. He's just a good person, which is why when he gets bitten at the end of the season, it's just genuinely horrible. You get the choice of what to do after he's bitten. Whether you shoot him in the head as a mercy or let him reanimate, it's up to you. But it's such a hard situation because this was a person who was never hopeless. Throughout the game, he is a constant source of encouragement and pure willpower. To see that get taken down, and to see someone who cares, who gives and gives on a constant basis throughout the story, it's just painful. And at number 4, extra spoiler because the remake is coming, but this is not new information, and if you care, you should know this already. Aerith from Final Fantasy VII. Aerith is the last of a race called the Cetra, the Ancients, the protectors of the planet, the children of the planet people. I don't know what you want to call them. They were that, though. She's another one of those people who's just endlessly positive and continually wants to go forward. She's carefree, but it comes from a bit of a place of naivete rather than a world weariness. She always wants to see more, and she always wants to try to save everything. In fact, that's what gets her killed. She takes the white materia to the city of the ancients to summon Holy, which of course interferes with the plans of Sephiroth, who wants to summon Meteor with the black materia. And that's when Sephiroth jumps down with his sword and impales her, apparently in a way that a Phoenix Down cannot be used, because there's nothing you can do about it. And it sucks. Even if you haven't chosen the path of romancing Aerith, which is something you can do in this game, there's a deep sense of loss. At number 3 is Johnny Clements from Grand Theft Auto 5. Now, keeping in mind he's not specifically from Grand Theft Auto 5, if you played The Lost and the Damned, he is the main character of that. Now you can say a very large amount about pretty much any character in the Grand Theft Auto universe. He's certainly not without his flaws and bad deeds, but he's somebody who does care. As the leader of the biker gang The Lost, Johnny manages to create a pretty peaceful situation. Obviously, things don't go great. The Lost suffers severe losses and their clubhouse is destroyed, thanks to Billy's betrayal. But he ends up sending money to Jim's wife and child, long after Jim's murder and everything goes down, and unfortunately also becomes addicted to meth at some point between the DLC and Grand Theft Auto 5, after having relocated to the other side of the country. This of course was intertwined with Ashley the meth addict, who was with Trevor Phillips but also having an affair with Johnny at the same time, and ultimately led to Trevor Phillips brutally murdering Johnny, whose last words were simply, "I messed up." At number 2, let's talk about John Marston. John Marston's father was a Scottish immigrant born on the way over the Atlantic Ocean. John didn't have very much growing up, and his father died when he was 8. He spent several years in an orphanage, and then after growing up, ended up in a gang with some outlaws, obviously. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a prequel to the first Red Dead Redemption, and over the course of it, we see John basically becoming a family man after being an outlaw. Dutch's philosophy of attempting to create change was an idealistic thing that he bought, although eventually at one point kind of decided maybe wasn't entirely real. And the government kidnapped John Marston's family to force him into acting against his former comrades. What we ultimately learn about John Marston is he's a man that just wants to be able to live with his family and have a decent life. He's definitely got blood on his hands, but in the Old West, that was pretty normal. Even after doing what the government wanted him to do, after freeing his family from a kidnapping, there was still a double cross that resulted in an attack on the ranch and got him killed. All John Marston ever did was for his family, especially during the last few years of his life. He was willing to go the distance, willing to do anything, and his reward was getting mowed down. And finally, number 1, let's talk about the other protagonist from the Red Dead series. More recently, Arthur Morgan. Arthur was Dutch's first protege. He was 14 when he joined the Vanderlyn gang and went from basically someone who had nothing, no prospects, no discipline, to an incredibly competent and invested individual. Through the course of events, he realizes that Dutch is gradually becoming something that he can't follow, and also gets diagnosed with tuberculosis. The most striking things about Arthur are really just the internal conflict he's constantly under. Depending on which way the game went, Arthur either dies of injuries and disease, however peacefully, or he's executed by the betrayer Micah. Through the course of the game, he becomes the moral center and really works out the actual problems of the gang, if only internally to himself. Just a quick bonus for you. Obviously a list where bonuses aren't particularly welcome. I'll keep it short. Sergeant Avery Johnson from Halo. Now there's plenty of backstory for him, but let's just go ahead and say he died fighting against a rogue AI, ultimately playing a big part in preventing more flood. Sergeant Johnson was absurd at times, happily saying some really over-the-top stuff to boost morale. And when it came down to it, he of course was willing to pay the ultimate price. In video games, a lot of people make the ultimate sacrifice, but it's us who spend the time getting invested. Speaking of, which of these deaths affected you most? Is there a death in another video game from someone who absolutely didn't deserve it that you feel bears mentioning? Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. The best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe and don't forget to enable all notifications. As always, thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on gameranx.